Every day, every single day, things are happening in the world of deals and deal makers. And there's never enough time to keep up with every company, transaction, announcement, or whatever. It's just exhausting. And we have a new product to help fix that. This is Axios Pro Deals, a new premium subscription product bringing you tailor-made insights like never before. For the last 5 years, Axios has helped deal professionals navigate the whole deal landscape with Pro Rata. With Axios Pro Deals, we're diving deeper into the industries that matter most to you. You just want stories on fintech? There's a newsletter for that. MedTech deals? We've got you covered. The future of retail? We'll guide you. With Axios Pro Deals, you're going to be getting all of this industry-specific insight and expert analysis at a level you simply can't get anywhere else. So if you're a venture capitalist, private equity investor, banker, trader, founder, executive, anyone who cares about deals, Axios Pro is what you need to help you understand what matters and why. Start your free trial today at AxiosPro.com.
Welcome to our State of Small Business Pivot to Digital event. I'm Javier David, Managing Editor of Business and Markets at Axios, and I'm coming to you from New York, New York. Also, welcome to our audiences on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, and of course, Axios.com. Please join the conversation on Twitter by adding us at Axios and hashtag Axios Events. Over the next 30 minutes, I will be joined by my colleagues, Erica Pandy and Naila Boudou. We'll examine how technology transformed small businesses during the pandemic and what features of this new era of e-commerce could be here to stay. Our first guest is the Administrator for the Small Business Administration, Isabel Guzman, joins us from Washington, D.C.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here with you.
Thanks again for joining us. So the pandemic's emergency phase has ended and related assistance programs have been sunsetted as society more or less shifts toward learning to live with the virus. What are the administration's plans to sort of bolster Main Street at this particular juncture?
Well, the SBA is the federal agency that's charged with advancing the American dream of business ownership to more individuals. And of course, the Biden-Harris administration is really focused on equity, ensuring that there's a level playing field, that all of our great ideas from everywhere and anywhere have the opportunity to succeed as successful enterprises. And so the SBA, of course, has its core competencies with great products around capital access, funding for businesses. We focus on trying to grow revenues for businesses through expansion opportunities, either abroad, online, or in the federal marketplace. And we also focus, of course, on layering technical assistance, networks to support our small businesses. We know how critical it is for our small businesses, especially now, to get the technical skills to position their businesses for the best success outcomes.
And one of those particular instances, I guess, is the shift to digital and electronic commerce, which was an integral part of the small business pandemic playbook with takeouts, deliveries, menus, QR codes, et cetera. Tell us a little bit more about the SBA's Digital Alliance and how technology has become really integral to the sector's competitiveness and some of the key private sector partners there.
We saw during the pandemic how small businesses had to pivot and adapt, those popular phrases. And so many of those businesses did it through digital skills and tools, finding opportunities to connect with their customers via new avenues. And small businesses could no longer rely on those customers to walk in through their doors. They had to figure out how to connect with them online via social media and create a presence. They also had to figure out e-commerce, different ways to sell in the marketplace, and adopt technology tools to manage their employees, their workforce, their operations, and which is a great advantage for small businesses. Those technology skills, those tools can really help streamline operations or create greater efficiencies and importantly create new markets for our small businesses. And so with a Small Business Digital Alliance was launched with the SBA in partnership with Business Forward to really take advantage of this moment where frankly, a lot of corporations and community development folks are really focused on the small business economy, making sure that our small businesses could survive, as well as this small business boom that we're seeing can yield great results with successful businesses that are sustainable. E-commerce did grow dramatically during the pandemic, and small businesses took advantage of that, and we want to see more of them do so. E-commerce, setting up your website, sets you up immediately to markets outside of your neighborhoods globally. And so the Small Business Digital Alliance is about creating free tools and trainings for our small businesses. We've reached over 1 million. We have over 200 tools and resources online at smallbusinessdigitalalliance.com or .org. And we would love to be able to connect more small businesses so they can advance their businesses via technology.
And you hit on a really important point, which a lot of new entrepreneurs struck out on their own during COVID-19. How does the SBA plan to support that boom in new small businesses? And as you also mentioned, it's not just money; it's about expertise, it's guidance, it's other non-tangible ways to support these businesses who really need it. So, if you could give us a bit of an idea about how the SBA can sort of foster this boom.
The SBA played such a critical role during the pandemic. In total, we provided $1.2 trillion in COVID relief to our small businesses across the country. And, that was really critical. The President's American Rescue Plan continued to expand and support, especially the smallest of the small businesses, those underserved small businesses who were perhaps left behind in early relief. And with this expanded portfolio, we have more sole proprietors, more small mom and pop shops in our portfolio than ever before. And so we're working really hard to continue to deepen those relationships, that awareness of SBA resources, so that our small businesses across the country can connect with the SBA, either through SBA.gov, but also through our expanded network of resource partners. We have over 1,300 small business centers around the country, development centers, small business development centers, women's business centers, veterans business outreach centers, as well as SCORE mentors on the ground. And we've expanded that through the Community Navigator pilot program that was funded with the American Rescue Plan to create more authentic relationships on the ground through organizations locally so small businesses could connect to advisors to help them get capital ready, contract ready, e-commerce ready, digital ready, whatever their pathway to growth and expertise. The SBA has tools and resources to help them with that business development. And I think now more than ever, it's really critical that our small businesses arm themselves with the team of SBA experts so that they can, succeed as we continue to deal with the COVID-related, disruptions in our marketplace.
And in the early days of the pandemic, there were issues with assistance programs that at least one Fed study found initially led to lower rates of participation among undeserved businesses. There were significant instances, unfortunately, of misuse, misallocation of funds, and fraud. What are some of the lessons learned there from that sort of really chaotic initial response to COVID-19 and the emergency to just sort of get money to where it needed to go, but unfortunately, again, that didn't quite happen the way it was supposed to?
And President Biden prioritized that. That was a clear message to me when I started at the SBA, that we wanted to make sure the funds got into the hands of those businesses it was intended to serve. We turned around our programs, implementing strong fraud controls and frameworks to make sure that that happened, as well as partnered to really reach those underserved communities. I think now more than ever, small businesses who needed to access those grant programs or forgivable loan programs or what have you had to become more financial ready, get their books in order, so to speak. And so we needed to make sure that we worked directly with those businesses. And the Government Accountability Office did a report on PPP in 2021 and found that thanks to the policy changes that we implemented during the Biden-Harris administration, as well as, of course, our outreach and efforts, that we were able to reach more, low to moderate income communities, underserved communities, rural communities than before. And so we're pleased with those results, but know that we need to double down. As the president likes to say, there's great ideas everywhere and anywhere. We want to make sure those small businesses are reached and that they can connect to the federal resources that are available to them.
Mm. We recently had data that shows small business hiring plans slowed, expectations are deteriorating. There's a tremendous amount of anxiety about inflation, labor supplies, shortage supplies, just higher borrowing and business costs overall, and just a generally unfavorable environment. So how exactly can the SBA help sort of rally the troops, particularly with respect to these newer entrepreneurs who have never faced conditions that we're currently facing now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been traveling around the country and meeting directly with these small businesses, and it's absolutely accurate that small businesses are continuing to face extreme challenges. And spoke with the baker the other day that saw increases in some core supplies like flour up to 4 times the cost, or eggs up to 6 times the cost. And you have small businesses. I've met with several manufacturers recently that are having to build up their inventories to higher levels than ever before. That takes a lot of precision in management. That takes access to capital to succeed, to be able to position your business for success. And so now more than ever, that affordable capital is so critical. And so the SBA is really committed to expanding its programs to ensure that they're more simple, that they're technology forward, so that they can be more customer centric, and that they're equitable. And so we're looking at simplifying eligibility and working with our lenders to make sure that there's an expanded distribution network for small businesses to come and get affordable loans backed by the federal government, by the SBA. That's first and foremost. And then, of course, the tools that are necessary to manage supply chains, to manage workforce, are really important. And our centers around the country, as well as our SBA district offices around the country, are positioned to help small businesses connect to local resources so that they can position their businesses, their employees or managers for success in all of those realms.
Administrator Guzman, I would like to thank you very much for having joined us today. And thank you for illuminating what the administration is doing to help Main Street.
It's been my pleasure. And, I think that what gives me great hope is that small businesses have that grit and determination to continue on. And we're seeing that across the country with the small business boom and their persistence.
Thank you. And next, we have a view from the top with Chris Freites.
Thanks, Javier. And thank you to our sponsor, Google Play, for making this conversation possible. And now joining me from San Francisco is Google's Vice President of Google Play Partnerships, Purnima Kuchikar. Purnima, welcome to Axios.
Hello, Chris. Thank you to be here.
So I am excited to talk with you today because the pandemic has really reshaped so much of our world, but in particular, our digital lives. And I'm wondering, how has consumer behavior changed as a result of the pandemic?
Consumer behavior, I think, has fundamentally changed as due to the pandemic. Over the last 2 years, we had to make a difficult decision between life and livelihood. And most of us who worked in digital didn't have to make hard choices, but that was not true for small businesses that relied on people to come into their stores to interact and to purchase. Restaurants, small shops, etc. Mobile bridged the gap. They helped small businesses go digital and created jobs for the ones who needed it. We've seen grocery delivery apps, food delivery apps, etc., reach 10-year KPIs over the last 2 years. This means user behavior has fundamentally changed. We saw users get to 4.8 hours per day on the phones, which is 30% more than 2019.
Yeah, that is a huge transformation from the consumer side. And I wonder, kind of on the business side, what trends are you seeing as businesses and small business in particular start to shift to more digital commerce?
Yeah, that is a very interesting thing as well. Consumer behavior has foundationally shifted. So, for example, we have found that grocery delivery companies, companies that were out there in terms of food delivery, e-commerce, etc., reached 10-year KPIs. Small businesses thrived, new jobs were created, and people were able to stay home, be safe, and now those behaviors are here to stay, we believe.
That is fascinating. And when you are looking at a small business, if you're a small business, how can small businesses thrive on a platform like Google Play? How does Google Play make sure apps succeed?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And that's what makes my everyday job wonderful, right? Every day I work with small business owners who are thinking of ways of improving the world around them and the communities that they belong to. Let's take two examples. Go Noodle from Nashville, Tennessee, has this audacious goal of being the force for joy, health, and well-being for kids and people who love them. They have an app that helps kids move and do interesting things. Because of Play, they can get distributed, and many people around the country can use them. 95% of elementary schools in the United States use Go Noodle now, which wasn't going to be possible without a platform like Play that reaches people, not only in the United States, but around the world. Take another example. We have Andrew Glantz from St. Louis, Missouri, who decided that the community needs to become for good. He has Gift the Meal, an app where a person can take a picture of the meal that they're eating, and the restaurant donates a meal for somebody who needs it. You know, that's important in an economy like this. 300 restaurants have participated, 850,000 meals have been given. So huge impact, not only locally, but beyond where they stay. This wouldn't have been possible. For me, what's interesting is all apps are small businesses, but with a global or a national storefront. You know, they say you put up your shingle and you figure out whether anybody's going to come. Play has 2.5 billion people who come to your storefront every month. And that's how you get discovered.
That is an incredible audience and quite a big storefront. And I wonder, as you watch this, Pranama, you and your team, what's one big shift that you see coming down the pike as businesses continue to evolve in the digital space? What's next?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. There's a few things, right? We are there with small businesses from the start of an idea till they expand globally. So a few things to think about. People are truly wanting to have high quality apps because they've become digital natives. We are there to help them build great high quality apps. People want to have a safe app that they can trust for themselves and their kids. And we take the time to not only help them build safe apps, but also think about the tools and SDKs. Those are the third-party app fragments, maybe that's the good way to say it, that people would use to say what is an SDK index of known SDKs. We provide tools to help them test across different devices to have high quality. And then if you look forward into the world, we also want to make sure that everyone can succeed, that tomorrow's innovation is not going to come from founders in Silicon Valley or people who look like the founders that we so admire, but they come from everywhere and they look like everyone. So for me, the future of digital transformation is everybody succeeding on Play. We have taken one small step towards that. And that is we created something called Change the Game to inspire high school girls to build games. I don't know if you realize 41% of gamers are women. That's our clarion call. You have a huge audience that requires you to come build the app and change the world. We are here to help.
I think that is a wonderful place to leave it. Purnima Kuchikar is the Vice President of Google Play Partnerships. Purnima, thank you so much for joining Axios.
Thank you for having me.
And now over to Erica Pandy.
Thanks, Chris. I'm Erica Pandy, business reporter for Axios, and our next guest is the founder and managing partner of 1863 Ventures, Melissa Bradley, joining us from Washington, D.C. Hi, Melissa. Thanks for doing this.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I want to start with a stat that I was looking at this morning. According to the 2020 Annual Business Survey, which covers 2019, approximately 18.7% of small businesses are owned by people of color. There's obviously a pretty stark underrepresentation there because people of color are more like 28% of our population. I want to get sort of the state of the union from you and have you set the scene for us. What has the past 2 years, our kind of COVID economy, how has that affected these businesses that are owned by Black and brown folks?
Yeah, I think as in any story, there's the good news and there's the bad news. So I'll start with the bad news. Statistically, research shows that over 50% of Black and brown businesses were lost during COVID. And unfortunately, that's not surprising. The distribution channels for PPP, the historical inaccessibility of traditional banks, obviously the lack of access to capital to be able to ride the wave of COVID certainly caused many businesses shut down. However, more recent data show that of the 4 million new businesses that have been started since COVID, which was after a 20-year decline, the majority of those businesses have been people of color, and the subset of those have been Black women. So I think what we found is that when the pandemic first hit, there was a shock to the system, and not many small businesses were able to recover very quickly due to the lack of access to capital. But I think over time, with a plethora of grant programs, with more investors coming online, with a rise in angel investors who are really committed to people of color, obviously coinciding with the unfortunate and untimely death of George Floyd, I think we see now a rise of Black and brown businesses who are surviving, and some are even thriving in their respective communities and in their respective sectors.
Right, just one quick question there. You've been in this space for so long. Is the surge in Black women-owned businesses, Black women entrepreneurship that we're seeing, is this a new thing that we're seeing? Are we seeing it at levels we hadn't before?
I think we are. I mean, I think, historically, there's always been a leadership role for Black women to be in entrepreneurship. But I think COVID and then the combination of George Floyd and then the culmination of the Great Resignation, I think what you're finding is that many more of these Black women entrepreneurs are actually becoming full-time entrepreneurs as opposed to part-time. I think awakening to say, hey, you know what? I need to change my life. I want to do things differently. Nothing is promised. And let me go ahead and take that leap. And I think that has been exacerbated because of, I think it was over probably over $500 million, I think it was, that was given out in grants through a variety of corporate commitments through post-George Floyd. So I think the risk tolerance, the desire to get away from where they were in corporate America, and a nice takeoff in terms of the grant programs really has increased and shifted from part-time to full-time entrepreneurship.
And then, we're here to talk about this pivot to digital. It's become so essential during COVID. All of the small businesses around me have tried to, have had to figure out how to get online. What does that mean to you when you think about small businesses pivoting to digital? What are the key things that come to mind?
I think there's three things that I think about. I mean, one, the recognition that, there are a lot of small businesses in this country, but many of them are what we call Main Street businesses. And so they survive through interaction and customers coming in and being able to browse. And I think those businesses were the most hard hit because they weren't even used to a digital strategy. Everything happened in person. And so I'd say for them, it's been a real struggle to really figure out what are the right tools, understanding their customers and how they get to them. I think the second group of businesses were those that were already beginning to sell online, but also expected a lot of it word of mouth, traveling to conferences, doing trade shows. And so at least the beauty is that their distribution already existed online. And so for some of those, it was just a need to really amp up the marketing and really understanding their customers and understanding the integration between social media channels and e-commerce and how to really expedite that process. And I think the third group were those who had already begun to catch on. And so COVID was really just an accelerant for them to really advance their strategy, to become much more sophisticated in their social media and marketing and integrations. I think for across the board for all three, though, it really forced them to understand who is my customer and how do I really make sure my customer knows I'm still here. A lot of the businesses, particularly in the Black and brown communities, we reside in 7 sectors, and it's not usually tech. So a lot of it is products and services. And so I think with the supply chain issues associated with COVID, I think the challenge around digital was more on the supply chain side and the distribution side. But I'm happy to say that many businesses quickly caught on in terms of how to pivot digitally and begin to have a footprint online for customers, new and old, to be able to find them.
Right, let's focus on that piece for a little bit, the marketing piece of it. How are you advising Black and brown owned businesses to get out there, to get their name out there? Is it social media? Is it something else?
I think it's a combination of whatever they can do. I think that social media has been a huge driver. I think it's the ability for them to tell their own stories, to have customers tell their own stories, to use the virality of people being able to like and share, and really encouraging customers to be part of the marketing team. I think that's the number one lesson. The second thing is to figure out, how do you get yourself out there? How do you get your name out there? How do you do articles? How do you get put in blogs? How do you get on customer referrals? How do you get on stories about the rise of Black and brown businesses or what's happening in CPG, to really start to think about segmentation and what are the right vehicles online that you should really position yourself and your company. And then the final thing is really to amp up their direct marketing campaign, to really get to know their customers, to stay engaged more than often. We typically tell folks to do customer inquiry maybe on a quarterly basis. We've said, let's try that bi-weekly. Let's try that monthly, and really understanding how to tailor their messages so you actually increase the greater likelihood of conversion.
And then what about the kind of supply chain logistics piece of it? How do you make sure these businesses have access to the same tools that, frankly, white businesses probably have much easier access to?
Yeah, the supply chain piece has been hard. I think the beauty is that the social media channels, for the most part, are relatively accessible. I think the difference between Black and brown businesses and white businesses is the amount of money to dedicate to online marketing. And so that's been a real disparity. We find that, Black and brown businesses aren't able to have the massive campaigns and do the banner ads and the frequency of delivery of messages. So which means it's more important for them to really understand what is the message and who are their customers. On the supply chain side, we've told our entrepreneurs 2 things. We said, 1, be brutally honest with your customers and make sure they understand what are logistics, particularly if you're a product-based business in the CPG space. Really make sure that you are clearly articulating to your customers no longer just about a sale or about a new product, but really understanding where is their product and what are the angst and pains that you're experiencing, so they can be on the journey with you and eliminate some of those shocks. The second thing is to really start thinking about diversification of your supply chain. So many folks have been relying on one co-packer or one supplier that's local or around the neighborhood, or a referral from somebody else. We've encouraged them to diversify, just like we have their marketing strategy, really diversify who are their suppliers, being willing to even go outside the United States, have someone local, have someone far away, and really be able to plan for that, both financially and from a production perspective.
So I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, but are there any businesses that come to mind, small businesses you've worked with, that have really embraced this pivot to digital, that are really thriving? I'd love to hear some stories kind of from the ground.
Yeah, there are actually 2. One is Terry with Brown Toy Box. And so she had usually thrived in being in stores. And what she's done is create an entire online content campaign. Then she's actually created characters that makes it endearing for kids to follow along and very easy for parents to understand why it's important to invest in culturally competent games. I think another one is Dr. K with True Stopper. She's an orthopedist in Texas who actually rebranded her entire website to actually integrate e-commerce. She sells CBD products. She's licensed to do so. She's in the business of pain. She recognized how important it is for people to have regular access. So she began to adjust who her suppliers were so that she would not run out. She changed her packaging, more eco-friendly. She began to change the interaction between commerce and website so she can actually facilitate sales much faster. And she's improved her mailing strategy. So that's been awesome. And I think there's many others like Nasa Clay with Eugenia Shea, which again was historically targeted in distribution outlets all across the country. She actually had a challenge of getting her product in China. And I would say that she used social media the best to be able to articulate to her customers what was happening, to make sure that when they were used to going to a store, what were the alternative channels, to have that regular communication and let them know what's happening and offer discounts and coupons and those kind of things moving forward. So we've seen a lot of folks really become creative and innovative. But I think the 2 biggest things are really increasing your interaction beyond sale and just entering a conversation with full transparency with your customers, and then obviously obviously really being creative in terms of how you sell and shoring up ways to be able to keep the customer happy, get their feedback, and get the product to them when you said you would.
So you started off by talking about the good news and the bad news, and the bad news being that this was a historically bad time for minority-owned businesses, but we're on the upswing. What does your workload look like for the next 2 years? What are some of the big challenges you're looking to tackle?
I think the biggest challenge we have is capacity. It is not a small feat to start a business. Entrepreneurship, I call it, is a team sport, and so it takes a team. And so I think our greatest challenge is we're actually actively recruiting more people to help us and to coach businesses. We have gone from last year serving over 1,500 businesses. This year, probably already on tap to serve 1,500 by the end of the month. So we're seeing an aggressive need to be able to be supportive. We've launched another fund to be able to provide capital. So we're excited, but we're very busy.
Thanks, Melissa, for an illuminating conversation.
Thank you.
And now I want to turn it over to my colleague, Nyla Boodoo.
Thanks, Erica. I'm Nyla Boodoo, host of Axios Today. Our final guest is Todd McCracken, the president and CEO of the National Small Business Association, joining us from Washington, D.C. Hi, Todd.
Hi, Nyla. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being with us. Todd, through your decades-long tenure at the National Small Business Association, what's the biggest way you've seen the needs of small business owners evolve, especially as we're thinking about these past few years of the pandemic?
I think it's really the change in the nature of their markets. I mean, we've seen so many small companies now that think of their markets as being regional, national, global, in a way that they used to only think of them as being local. And that's a real testament to the power of technology, but it also has added so much complexity to their worlds that we don't often talk about. So it's a real challenge, but it's been a big change that I've certainly seen over these decades.
And so when it comes to challenges small businesses are facing, how crucial, where do you rank technology up against things like inflation or rent prices?
I mean, it's huge. I mean, it's both of those two things are big challenges right now. They aren't always challenges, but technology, of course, is both a challenge and an opportunity at the same time for small companies. So it always has to rank pretty high because there's more than one facet to it. It's a key that small companies can use to unlock new markets, to compete more effectively with their bigger competitors, and to add efficiency, great deal of efficiency to their companies. On the other hand, there are huge learning curves to get it right. There are things they have to do with very short staff to make sure that everything is running smoothly. And there are big, often cybersecurity challenges that can come with adoption of additional digital tools and technology as well that small companies are least able to handle.
So when you think about your association, where do you all see the priorities in terms of giving small business owners resources and information that they need to make this pivot and to use digital tools more effectively?
Yeah, well, it's a huge priority for us. I mean, we're primarily an advocate for small companies. We work with, of course, policymakers, but we also want to get real tools into the hands of our members and the small business community nationally. And I think a real key launchpad for this was the pandemic, frankly. And we had a series of webinars with key technology partners to talk about how companies could pivot. And we joked about how we overused that word pivot, but it was a real thing for small companies then to figure out different ways of doing business, especially those that were operating in storefronts of some kind, to change their operations. And I think that's part of what's driving the economic growth that we've seen since then, is they have done things because of the pandemic that they probably should have done a long time ago. But their hand was forced, and it's paying real dividends for a lot of those companies. So we've had a series of events to help them think that through and to talk about that. But then we've also partnered with other companies on the other end to help them think about how they can use that technology effectively. I mean, for instance, Cisco and some cybersecurity firms all stepped up to help our members with some key tools as their employees tried to work from home, and all the rest. So. Those are the ways that we have seen best to do it. And I also would encourage any small companies to also make sure they talk to their sort of industry sector organization, because each type of company has some unique concerns and opportunities that they should find out more about.
Why do you think it was such a hard turn in terms of implementing technology? Is it a question of resources? Is it a question of education? Is it all of those things?
It's all of those things. It's also, and very importantly, for the very small company, and I'm talking about companies with fewer than, say, 10 employees, it's a matter of time. I mean, because if that change is going to get driven, it's going to be driven by the business owner. And they have to see the vision. They have to see what the opportunity is. They have to understand how the new business process would work. At the same time, they're hiring and firing employees, they're dealing with customer relations, they're trying to develop new markets. And that's often what gets in the way, which I think is why the pandemic was, in some ways, such an opportunity for some of those companies, because it forced them to pay attention to this one thing, because it was clearly the way forward for so many of those companies. Now, I don't want to have a pandemic every time we need some organizational change and some adoption of new tools for small companies, but there was a silver lining here for that.
Now we're sort of in this in between phase where we're thinking particularly of hybrid workers, people
Mhm.
who are back to sort of this like hybrid in person as well as online life. How do you see that changing small business owners, especially when they're thinking about switching from maybe they were completely in person and then they went to
Mhm.
to completely online and maybe now they are back into a hybrid mode?
Yeah, we've talked a lot about this with our members, and they're still feeling their way, because they haven't found what they think are effective ways in many cases to do a hybrid mode. They wind up coming to the office. If they're not all there at the same time, they still have meetings, on Zoom or whatever their platform happens to be, which is at some level not the reason you wanted people to come back to the office. So it's a real conundrum for small companies, and I think it is one that technology could help them to solve, but I don't think it has yet. And I think as we uh, see the economy perhaps turn a little bit more south and the job market soften a bit, if that happens, I think we'll see probably more return to the office, because those employers will have more leverage to do that. That's really what they would prefer, I think. Um, Although many companies have already taken advantage of renegotiating their leases and reduced their office footprint, so they really can no longer accommodate a full in-person staff. So they've already made their decision.
And what about a customer base? What about small businesses that rely on customers? What do you think the biggest challenges there are for customers or clients that want to operate in this hybrid world?
There actually, I think that there are huge opportunities, because uh, I know in our and just running our association, but lots of other small companies that are members, they're now able to have some level of a face-to-face with customers they might have only had a phone or an email relationship with before. So it can really deepen and I think expand those relationships. And it's also easier to schedule, because you don't have the travel time either if it's it's just driving across town, never mind a flight. So it enables, I think, a much deeper relationship. That may be counterintuitive to some people, that the computer is going to be a deeper relationship than in person, but it can be more frequent, more immediate, and takes the place of a conference call or a phone call from the past. So I think that really inures to the benefit of most small companies. But challenges are, depending on which kind of tools and technology they're using. Customers can become really turned off if things are too automated in some cases, if the experience isn't smooth, hasn't been thought through, and it isn't kept up to date. And so if you don't have the right kind of staff and tools in place to ensure your customers are seeing what they need to buy and getting responded to, then there can be some real downsides.
We're both based in Washington. I wanted to ask you about Congress, in particular,
Yeah,
its attempts to regulate big tech. What does
yeah.
the NSBA think of this recent antitrust push? Just one last question for you about how you think this will impact small business owners in particular.
Well, it is interesting because so much of what the single biggest use that we found in our surveys of new technology for companies and digital tools is social media. They use it a great deal for marketing. And so while we have lots of concerns around big tech, around the way they use privacy data and in some cases misuse it, we're also concerned that if they get broken up, what happens to those companies that are using those tools? Uh, and how they use them. So we want to make sure that as this moves forward, we sort of think about that. We think about not just the end goal we want to get to, but also the transition period and how we can, and think about re-regulating big tech in a way that gets us the goals we want, while also making sure that small companies that have invested in the networks that exist today don't get significantly disrupted in the process.
What do small business owners tell you their biggest fear is on that front?
It's just that losing access to data. I think that's already happened. I think from one side of, I should say, no, one side away from some particular companies to a degree. But I think so much of what the small companies need larger networks for is to get information on potential customers, what their buying trends are, what they're responding to, stuff they cannot get on their own. They don't have a big enough data pool to do that. And some of these aggregators enable that. Obviously, that comes with a lot of other challenges and risks, but it is something that we've got to keep our eye on.
Todd McCracken is the president and CEO of the National Small Business Association, joining us from Washington, D.C. Thanks for your time, Todd.
You're very welcome.
Thank you all for joining this afternoon for another virtual conversation that's made everyone smarter, faster. For more news around the state of small business, sign up for the Axios Business Suite of newsletters, including macro, closer, and markets at axios.com/newsletters or on the Axios app, where you can also tune in to Axios Today. Thank you all for joining, and I'll see you on axios.com.